Hello, welcome to Chuy's Education Corner. This is Richard Marquez, aka Chuy. You see me out there somewhere, you just yell, "Hey Chuy." One question I get asked often is the question about new teachers. How do you work with new teachers? It's very critical for new teachers to be successful on day one because it establishes their routines, it establishes a feeling of success, and that feeling of success may keep them in the business for a lot longer. If they feel, when people are successful, they'll stay wherever they're working. So what I tell them is, look, teaching is a profession that requires for you to understand the scientific method to teach human beings. So when you look at teaching today, all the lesson plans or the plans that the teachers use for every class that they teach are generated by the company that produces the curriculums. So the teachers never get a real background on how a lesson plan is truly built, so that they themselves have an understanding of how a lesson plan is built, so they get a feeling for exactly how and why and the way it should be delivered. And so usually what I have to do is I have to take them back and look at their lesson plans, pull them down off of the computer or just look at them on the computer, and then outline for them the basic steps. The first one is, look at this lesson. What's the goal? What are the kids supposed to be able to accomplish when you finish this goal? When you teach them, what is it you're teaching them? What are they supposed to be able to do at the end? And how do you prove that you actually were successful doing what you said you were going to do? So that's the first step, breaking down those goals and seeing to it that they understand why they're teaching this stuff. And so a lot of times you'd be surprised that teachers just do it because they're told to do it, which has a negative effect, because if you don't really believe in what you're doing, you're not going to do a very good job with it. So they have to basically learn to look at what the expectations are and then begin to work off of those expectations. The next step is you look at your materials, and they give you one of the big things about these new curriculums is they give you all these materials and all these resources. But again, if you don't know what the materials are supposed to be doing for you and doing for the kids, then you just basically teach them without any real direction. So you have to know your goals, and then you have to align those materials to achieve those goals. So the next thing I say is, okay, so how are you going to demonstrate this stuff to them? How are you going to show them? Because you have to show them what the expectation is. You can't just throw it out there and say, do this. Here, let me show you. Like the algebra teacher I had at one point. He'd walk in the classroom. He'd put two sample problems on the board. He'd do them. He'd say, all right. And then he'd do the problems. And then he'd say, okay, now do pages so-and-so out of your book, do page so-and-so and so-and-so. And then he'd leave the classroom. And so at that point, you were left to fend for yourself if you're going to pass this algebra class. And basically, we were teaching ourselves. Needless to say, a C in that class was pretty darn good as far as I'm concerned. Because to be honest with you, I don't know how much algebra I really learned. So that's my example. If you just show them a couple of things and so on, and then you just turn them loose, they don't necessarily know what it is you want them to do. So you basically have to get them to explain to you what they're supposed to be doing. So before you turn them loose, talk with them and say, all right, so what are you going to do? Show me. Come up here, you so-and-so and so. Show me what you're going to do. And then ask the others, is he right? Is she right? Is that what I asked you to do? Does everyone understand what it is? Who doesn't understand? The rest of you go to work and you go over to the student and you sit down with that student, or you work next to them and you say, okay, this is what I want you to do. So that every one of your kids knows what the expectation is. And then you don't sit down, you walk around and monitor your lesson plan. See, that lesson plan gives you directions as to what you should be doing. You walk around and you look for the kid who's struggling, who still maybe didn't understand what it is you explained for them to do. But you look for that child who's struggling and you help them make that transition, and you help them understand that fine point or the basic that you're trying to get them to do for you. What you're doing is you're looking to see if they're achieving what it is you want them to achieve, so they can show you that they learned what you were trying to teach them from the very beginning. So the lesson plan is a roadmap, and that's what I basically talk to the teachers about. It's how your class period is supposed to run. It should even have minutes on it. And a lot of the lesson plans do. They'll say, do this for 10 minutes, do this for 15 minutes. But don't take it literal. Don't set a time, don't set a clock. But remember, you need to keep pace, because that pace is critical to you. You won't, the kids won't lose focus, and they'll keep working if you maintain a good pace and you maintain good time limits. But your lesson plan needs to outline all of those things. So once I get a teacher, or a new teacher, or even a teacher who's struggling, once I get them to understand the importance of the lesson plan and the delivery of that lesson plan, that's the first thing that begins to put them on the road to being successful in the classroom. It's not everything, but with that kind of a start, your possibilities become very good to achieve what it is you're trying to achieve in that classroom. So don't just do the lesson plan as it's written in the curriculum guide. Don't just follow it like a drone. It's not going to work. It will not work unless you put your personal touch to it and your value to it. It's not going to work. So lesson plans are extremely important in the field of teaching. It is your roadmap. And so learning how to write one will help you with making decisions about what you do when one is given to you and written by somebody else. So that's my first direction, and the first thing I do whenever I'm working with a beginning teacher, a struggling teacher. And I've had very good success with it. Thank you. What's the number one thing that most people want to talk about whenever they talk about improving teachers and so on and so forth? Invariably, they always bring up that teacher who's struggling with kids. They have discipline issues. They have discipline problems. They can't maintain classroom discipline. They can't, There are a lot of reasons for it. The first one is poor planning. So the first thing you have to do is you have to check and see how well they plan. The next thing you have to do is you have to see how their interactions are with their kids. In most situations, most discipline issues are self-inflicted wounds. Treat others as you would have them treat you. We forget that adage sometimes because they're children, and we get the feeling that they need to be told. And so instead of, they need to be disciplined. Discipline doesn't mean beating, spanking, sticking your head next in the corners and so on and so forth. It means making them responsible for their actions. And then always treating them with respect. That's right. Treating them with respect. One example usually that teachers do in the classrooms is they'll yell at a kid in the classroom in front of the other kids. Or they'll berate the kid in front of the other kids. that immediately sends reverberation through the entire class. They know the kind of person you are. You just demonstrated it. That child may not have been doing the wrong thing. That may not have been the individual that was causing the issue. But you went off on that kid in front of everybody. The first thing I do is I explain to any adult, any teacher working in the school, that yelling, first of all, means that you're out of control, that you don't know how to control the situation, so you yell in order to dominate the other individual or dominate the situation using your voice. And that may work sometimes in a crowded room where you want to get the attention of a crowd, speaking audience or something, or you're in the middle of something, and well, you know those situations where yelling is appropriate. But the majority of the time, yelling is not appropriate, especially if it's toward another human being. If you want to discipline a child or you want to find out what's going on, don't do it by yelling at Clara across the room and having a discussion with that kid across the room. You just threw everybody else in the room off. You created your own discipline issue. Ask that child to come to your desk, or ask that child to step out with you for a second. And then ask the child questions. What were you doing back there? What was going on? What did you do? Why were you doing that? What you've done is you've respected that child by dealing with them absent of the rest of the class so nobody can hear what it is that's going on. And I have a lot of teachers who say, yes, Mr. Martinez, but while I have that child outside the classroom, my other kids are going crazy inside that classroom. So what I say to them is, look, I understand exactly what you're saying. Kids are kids. What I would do is I stand in the doorway with my eyes directly on my class, and then I talk to the child back and forth on the other side of the wall. They don't know what I'm saying, and they can't hear the other child. But they know that I'm talking to the child out there, and they also know that I can see what they're doing. So that I control both circumstances and both situations by having that discussion with that child privately. The only things that should be done in public, in other words, in your classroom, should be celebrations and should be rewards. Say good things to your kids in front of the others. Keep your negatives to where they're private and quiet and personal and not public. That'll go a long way to helping you deal with your kids, because your children will follow the same metrics. Because at that point, you can talk to them about those kinds of things. You can say things like, do I ever yell at you? Do I not listen to you? I don't berate you in front of anybody else. Then don't do that to me. Do I treat you with respect? Then why do you treat me with disrespect? I give you this, I expect you to do the same thing. So it's reciprocal. And they'll learn to do that. That's why when you go to many classrooms, the kids are extremely well behaved and they interact with the teachers quite well. Because the teachers aren't pushovers. They have consequences. They'll do things like, very quietly, they'll tell a student, say, come to my desk when the rest of them leave the class, you come by my desk because I need to talk to you. And when the rest of them are all exiting, the student's standing there, they know something's up. But they can appreciate the fact that you're not doing it in front of them. And so when they exit the class, then you deal with that individual child, and then you can say the kinds of things that you need to say to that kid. And you can say, you misbehaved today. So how are you going to pay me back? Don't be the bad guy. That's another thing we got a terrible thing of doing. We take full responsibility for their problem. We didn't cause the problem. You didn't create the situation. They did. So make them responsible for it. Say, what are you going to do to make up for that? That you should see their faces when you say to them, how are you going to pay me back for that time you wasted? When you created that issue, you not only took my time, you took the time of your classmates. They want to learn. And whenever you take their time, they lose out on their learning. So how do you intend to pay us all back? What do you intend to do that will make it better? They hate that aspect of it. Making them accountable for those responsibilities, for creating that issue, is one of the biggest discipline things that you can do for them. Plus, it teaches them responsibility. So when people talk discipline and consequences, they're not talking bad things. They're talking things that cause the kids to think, that cause the kids to figure out the hows and the whys of why things are done. So discipline has a lot of connotations, but a lot of the aspects of real discipline is self-control. And that's really what you're trying to teach them. Respect for themselves, respect for others, and then self-control. Well, the only way you teach them it's self-control is to make them responsible for their own actions. And then if they don't come up with something, then you take away something. You can't go to something they like. They can't go to specials. Or they can't go to recess. They can't go to gym. Or they can't go. Some kids hate gym, by the way. So you say you can't go to gym, they'll say, okay, not a problem. That doesn't hurt me. That's not a thing. Pay attention to what your kids really like in terms of where they like to go, because that's what's going to cost them. Or you can say, you know what? You can sacrifice and say, why don't you eat lunch with me today? They're not going to enjoy that. So that's the kind of discipline that works. And it doesn't just work for the young kids. It works for all kids, even high schoolers. I know I've used it. They don't like that aspect of being made responsible for their actions. And they don't like the fact that you ask them to lay out their own punishment. It works. Take care.